Okay, good morning, Gideon. We are on Mem Amud Aleph 40a.
I'm doing this for you. So I don't know if you should turn your head.
Thank you. So we discussed yesterday, or last time, sorry, what is to be said in the Moedim. That was the last thing we discussed. When the Chazan repeats the Amidah and he gets to Moedim, the community responds with Moedim Manach Nalach, and we went through different sages who added different phrasings to that Moedim. And the essential idea is we thank Hashem for giving us the opportunity and awareness to be able to thank. And it tied in with the humility discussed earlier. We had stories of Rabbi whose humility. And this is the ultimate humility. To acknowledge that even the whatever good I have is also from you, Hashem. As it was the case with Rabbi and Abed Minako, even though their interpreter took credit for the message or even changed the message, with the humility to say, it's not my message, it's Hashem's message. And whether it comes from me or him, what's the difference? So with that, the Gemara now, on a simple level, goes back to the discussion on Birchas Kohanim, but it actually continues this idea of humility. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from the bottom of the page, middle of the line, Amr Rabbi Yitzchak. Amr Rabbi Yitzchak taught, La'olam, as a rule, Tehei Emas Tzibur Alecha. The awe, the reverence, the respect, the fear of the community should be upon you. The fear and reverence of the power of the community, the presence of the community, the entity of the community. Where does Rabbi Yitzchak derive this? Sharei, considering the fact that Kohanim, the Kohanim as they bless the people, Pneim, their faces, Klapaya'am, are facing towards the people. They face the people. Vachareim, and their backside, Klape Shchina, towards the presence of God, back to the altar, to the ark, face to the people, indicating the great awe and reverence one should have toward the community, to the point that as the Kohanim bless the people, they're facing their back to Hashem and facing toward the people.
It's true, eh?
Right? Now, obviously, this is not a disrespect to God. God forbid. You're being the conduit for Hashem's blessing. Right? And it's kind of similar, because the Gemara does not make this comparison, but it's kind of similar to the Gemara elsewhere, which comments that receiving guest is greater than receiving the presence of God. From where do we know this? From Avraham. Avraham was conversing with God and he said, hold on, I got guests coming. Yeah, very similar thing. Back to Hashem, facing the people. Obviously, neither Avraham nor the Kohanim are back to Hashem is a disrespect to Hashem, God forbid. The message here is that proper respect and awe for people is the ultimate respect for Hashem. The ultimate respect and honor to Hashem is respect and honor to a fellow Jew. That's the essence of it. Right? This is what we're learning on Shabbos afternoon. Right? To assume that I have this wonderful relationship with Hashem that excludes other Jews is to misunderstand what it means to connect to Hashem. And connecting to Hashem means connecting with the fellow Jew. So, God metaphorically, God forbid for a Jew to turn his back on another Jew, literally and metaphorically, using the excuse, oh, well, I'm connecting to Hashem right now, so I'm turning my back on you. That's not a connection to Hashem. Right, so the word here uses Shechina. Shechina means manifest. So even though God's everywhere, God's presence is not manifest everywhere. Manifest in terms of revealed to us. But in the ark, it is manifest to us. This is a holy spot. Right, and the back to the ark and facing the people. And again, the point I'm suggesting here is that it's not a disrespect to Hashem, God forbid, but that is the ultimate respect to Hashem. To face and bless another Jew, to help another Jew, to invite a guest in. It's not to ignore Hashem. It's to touch Hashem in a deeper way, even if it's back to the manifest, sorry?
And to put you back to the work.
Yeah, so, ever, right? This is the famous story of, there was a chassid, his name was You have Michal Bliner, also referred to as Michal the Alter, Michal the Old One. This Reb Michal was the mashpia, was a mentor in the Chabad Yeshiva Tem Chetimim in the town of Lubavitch, back in Russia, the original Chabad Yeshiva in Russia. And
Still there?
I don't think the yeshiva is still there anymore. No, but it's the original founding of the yeshiva 150 years ago. No, this year they're celebrating 125 years, maybe. Anyway, so this Michal got old, and it was hard for him to give classes and communicate with the boys anymore. So there was a discussion, I guess, in the staff amongst the leadership, the administration of the yeshiva, maybe to let him go. You have to pay him, keep him on payroll. He's not teaching anymore. And the decision, which I believe came down from the Rebbe at the time, to keep him on staff. What was his logic? The boy should see what it looks like to daven. He should be paid just to sit around, daven and learn, just so the boy should watch what it looks like to daven and learn, even though he lacked the ability to communicate in the same enthusiasm as he used to. So the story goes that once he was davening, and it was in the middle of Shema. There's two versions to the story, but the main part of the story is the same. During the Shema, they saw him going like this. Pointing, snapping fingers, pointing. What are you doing? What are you doing? And there's two versions to the story. One is he was in charge of Pidyon Shvoim, which meant to redeem captive Jews who got put in jail for not being able to pay rent or whatever. Whatever reason, he would raise funds to get them out. And he was snapping his finger to get money for that or to help someone for that. And the other version of the story is that he saw some boy with ripped shoes and snapping his finger, telling people to get him a pair of shoes. So they asked him afterwards, in the middle of Shema is the higher unity of God. So he responded by saying, what do you think the higher unity of God is, if not to help another Jew? What do you think it is? Right? That's the point here. What do you think it is to respect Hashem? To tell the people behind you, nah, you go behind me, I'm talking to God. That's not a relationship with Hashem. So turning your back on a fellow Jew, using the excuse that I'm connecting to Hashem, there's no connection to Hashem. Put your back to Hashem, quote unquote, back to the ark, and bless another Jew, turn away from Hashem and greet a guest. That's a real connection to Hashem, even if it isn't manifest connection to Hashem, the essential connection to Hashem. Thus, as Rabbi says here, let the fear, the awe, the reverence of the community be upon you always. And I guess this ties into that humility mentioned before. The humility to Hashem's message, described above in Rabbi, he gave the job away to someone else can take the credit. So long as the job is done, that humility also extends to a connection with a fellow Jew, and in fact, that's the essence of it. Okay. Similarly, Rav Nachman says, Mehacha. This idea that the reverence to the community should be of utmost importance is derived, says Rav Nachman, not just from the idea that the Kohenim put their backs to the ark and faced the people, but from the following verse. The following verse is a verse describing the events when King David is urging the people to donate to the construction of the temple that will take place after his passing. Right? King Solomon builds a temple, but David gets the credit for it. He raised the funds for it. He urged it, organized it. Sorry? Yeah, so this is a speech he gives. This verse describes him giving a speech, encouraging the people to donate. And the verse reads, Vayokom Melech David al Raglav, and King David stood up on his feet. And he said, Shema'uni achiv ami, listen to me, my brothers, my people, my nation. And he goes on to say, encouraging them to donate. So the Gemara comments, Im achai, if King David refers to the Jews as my brothers, lama ami, why is he referring to them as my people? As if they're subordinate. My people, as in I'm king, you're my people. Brothers are equals. So if he's referring to them as brothers, lama ami, why are you referring to them as subjects? Lim ami, and if he's referring to them as subjects, lama achi, why is he referring to them as brothers? So Amar Rabbi Lezer explains. David Israel. King David here is trying to convey the following message to the Jewish people. If you listen to me and you're donating enthusiastically to the temple as I'm enthusiastically trying to get it done, Achai, then you are my brothers, you're my equals. Atem, you are. Him lav. And if you don't heed my call, Amiyatem, then you're my people, you're my subjects. And I will, Roida means I'll rule you, the makal with a rod. So if you guys follow instructions, you're my equals. You don't, we have to treat you like subordinates. So from here we derive, says Rabbi Nachman, that when the people are behaving as they're supposed to, then they are equals. And thus, the fear of the people should be upon you, and that they are equal to you as a leader. Now, this is a little bit different than the previous derivation. The previous derivation, which described they're both trying to make the same point, ostensibly. They're both trying to make the point that the respect and honor of the community should constantly be with you. The first is derived from the fact that the back is to the Kohen's back is to the ark and facing the people. And the second derivation is from the fact that King David referred to the people as brothers. But there's a big difference. When it comes to the blessing of the Kohen, what did we learn? Whether the people are deserving or not deserving, the blessing flows. So it's not conditional. Whereas with the second derivation, where King David refers to the people as brothers, it's conditional to their behavior. So it's a little bit different. The second derivation seems to be that the reverence for the community is limited to when the people are deserving of that kind of respect and awe and reverence. Whereas the first derivation seems to imply just the very fact that Jewish people are there requires your awe and reverence. So like the Birchas Kohen, sorry? Yeah, good point. Maybe a person in King David's position can do that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the difference. I'm just pointing out there's a slight difference here. That if you derive it from the Birchas Kohen, then it's equal for everybody. If you're deriving it from King David, it seems like it's subject to their behavior.
Well, off the point, but this thought just came to mind that it seems like a tremendous kindness from King David because, the normal king rules over people, say non-Jews,
By fear to begin with. Yeah, that's a good point.
But here he's saying, well, if you just follow my orders, which people are supposed to do anyway, then I'll treat you as an equal. It seems
it's a humility there. It's back into the humility point.
And beyond.
That's a very good point.
A king.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point. So in both cases, whether you're deriving from Kohen or King David, the people who are instructed to respect the crowd are people in a position of power. The Kohen, the power to bless via Hashem, and King David, the power to rule also via Hashem. They're both in a position of power, right? In the first case, Kohen, non-conditional. Right? In the second case, I think you're making a good point.
Yeah.
That King David's humility to Hashem translates in the fact that if the people follow his/God's orders, then they're equals to me. Even though as king, he doesn't have to make that condition. He can just say, you're my people and you follow my instructions, and that's the end of it. No equals at all. It's a very good point, tying into this humility thing.
I think it was ties in what Judge Shore was saying about leadership. Use it for power or use it as a responsibility.
Back to Rabbi,
or service.
Back to Rabbi, who was in a position of power connected to the government, but because of his humility, that's what made him a good leader. So with King David, that's a very good point. This very much ties into this humility notion that King David as king is giving the option for his people to be equals. Something that a king
incredible
very much so. Very much so.
I was just reading, I don't know where I read it, that the Kohen, when he goes up to Duchen, he's got to wash his hands, right? And he can't touch his shoes anymore. So his shoelaces must be untied. But when he's finished up, he's still not allowed to touch his shoes.
Not left davening, yeah. Otherwise, you have to wash your hands again.
Because everybody ties their shoes.
Then you'd have to wash your hands again before you continue davening. Yeah. Anyway, it's not so off the topic because the next line is going to be about the Kohen taking off their shoes. Yeah. So Rabbanan Amri, the sages said, Mehacha, a third derivation, a third place to derive this idea that a person should have the respect of the community. So the first derived from the Kohen and putting their back to the ark and facing the people. Second, from King David providing the option for people to be equal. And now third derivation for the same idea that the awe and reverence of the community should be on the leaders. Where is it derived? Because Dain HaKohen and Rashoyin, it's inappropriate for the Kohen, Lalois, to go up to Duchen, to go up to bless the people, the Sandalayan, with their shoes on, Laduchen, to the podium. What's the reason? So the Gemara explains. This is one of Mitesha Takanis from 9 institutions. Established. The famous sage there at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, the one who negotiated with Vespasian to keep the yeshiva intact, the famous Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So he instituted 9 decrees, and one of them is that Kohanim should not wear shoes when they go to bless the people. Now, my time, what's the reason? And how does this translate to reverence of the community? Explains the Gemara. Lav Mishon, is it not? Mishon covered the Sibur. Out of respect for the community, they're taking their shoes off, right? Kind of like, where's the Rashi? So Rashi explains like this. When you go up to the Bima, right? They raise their hands, right? And if you're wearing, let's say, like especially the kind in the temple, well, temple aren't wearing shoes at all, but kind of back in the old day, right? You're raising your hands, and you're wearing like this tunic that goes from your shoulders down to your feet. Yeah. So when you raise your hands, the bottom of the tunic comes up, and your feet get exposed. Your shoes get exposed, and shoes back in those days are full of mud and dirt. So it's disrespectful to the community. So take them off. And this, said the sages, is the reason why, is another indication of respect for the community. This seems to be a very, very subtle respect. It's not just respect, you're facing them, but that when they're looking at you, your presentation toward them should be so perfect that if you have muddy shoes that are going to be visible when you raise your hands, take them off. Okay. But the Gemara rejects that explanation. Amar Rav Ashi says, Loi, that's not the reason why they take off their shoes, so that people shouldn't see their dirty shoes. That's not the reason. Awesome. The reason why the reason why he takes his shoes off is because maybe one of his shoestrings are broken, and he's gonna have to go back. He's embarrassed. People see broken shoes, so he goes back to fix them or to change his shoes. And by the time that happens, he's gonna miss the whole Berachas Kohanim. And people in the crowd will say, Ben Grusha ben Chalutzahu. This guy's an invalid Kohen because his parents are divorced or something, or his mother or his father married a divorcee. So not to embarrass him, make him take off his shoes. In modern times, it seems very far-fetched. Both reasons seem far-fetched nowadays. And people walk around with dirty shoes. Everybody's busy polishing their shoes nowadays. And people see your shoes before you raise your hands anyway, as well as how many people notice their shoes are ripped. Now they're running embarrassed to change their shoes. But it seems like maybe back in the day, this was more common. Maybe it was more common.
Shoes are probably a lot more expensive back then.
Sorry? Shoes are more expensive.
More expensive.
They weren't changed as often. They were more used and abused because you're not living with good, clean roads. You're living with mud and dirt, and especially if you're out on a farm or who knows what. So it's possible that these were more, I would imagine these are more common problems. Yeah, exactly. But I would also add that perhaps the following. Perhaps the idea of taking off the shoes is a spiritual notion. But when you take a spiritual idea and you put it into halacha, you often find like physical terms to explain the halacha. So, for example, the halacha is that if Rosh Hashanah is Shabbos, you don't sound the shofar. Same thing with Lulav Nesrik. Don't shake Lulav Nesrik if the first day is Shabbos. Why not? Explain the Gemara. Because we're worried some person's not going to know how to blow shofar. So he's going to walk to the rabbi, ask him how to blow. And in the meantime, he's carrying a shofar. This is what the halacha says, the Gemara says. Now, Chassidus asks, that's such a far-fetched note. We learned about this a couple of weeks ago on Thursday night. We talked about tchelas. Remember that? We talked about the blue string. The Rashab mentioned this idea. Yeah, so Chassidus asks, it's extremely far-fetched. First of all, the rabbi usually blows a shofar in shul. How many people are blowing shofar for themselves? And someone doesn't know that he blows a shofar, he's going to carry the shofar to ask. And because of this far-fetched idea, you're going to cancel the mitzvah of shofar from people who know the law not to carry on Shabbos. Millions of Eden are being canceled from a biblical commandment because of a far-fetched. So explains Chassidus that the truth is, spiritually speaking, Kabbalistically speaking, shofar is not necessary on Shabbos. The spiritual achievements of shofar are achieved by Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah. The combination of shofar and Rosh Hashanah, and the combination of Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah have the same effect, spiritually speaking. Now, for a spiritual reason, you can't cancel a halacha. You can't change a halacha for a spiritual reason alone. So you have to couch it in some halachic validity, and now the halacha can be established. This is what Chassidus explains.
And that's why they said it was a worry about carrying.
That's right. So the worry about carrying is not the essential reason. It's the physical manifest. It's the halachic physical. It's the physical packaging in which the halacha can be physically implemented. Because you have to have physical halachic legs to implement a law. And just to say, because spiritually speaking, shofar accomplishes the same thing as Shabbos or Shoshana, that doesn't have halachic legs. To give it halachic legs, you have this explanation that someone might carry. So perhaps a similar thing here. Taking off the shoes at the Birchas Kohanim is, I would imagine, is a spiritual idea. Similar to Moshe Rabbeinu being told to take his shoes off when he sees the burning bush. And the Kohen, when he's in the temple, takes his shoes off because it's a holy ground. The idea of taking off shoes for holy ground is a common thing.
Yeah.
And that's perhaps really what's going on in Birchas Kohanim. If you're the conduit for God's blessing, then this is like a holy ground you're on. Now, that itself may not be enough to implement the halacha. Exactly. So perhaps that itself may not be enough to establish halacha. So we have like these physical reasons that give us halachic legs for a spiritual notion, perhaps. I haven't seen this written anywhere, but perhaps.
And the father once told me, this is God's house.
Yeah. According to one opinion in the Gemara, this is the extension of the temple. We come into shul. I actually think that back in the day,
Do it in temples.
sure,
The Muslims do it.
yeah, the Muslims do it. But I think also, sorry?
Japanese do it.
So I think actually in many of the old synagogues, like talking about Wales, there are a few of them in North America as well. They actually had
New York?
in North America. I think there's one like this still in the Caribbean, maybe even more. There's also an old shul in Rhode Island. I think one of the oldest shuls in North America is in Rhode Island somewhere. The one George Washington went to go visit or something. In what is it? Plymouth? It's in Rhode Island, right? Isn't there a story of the? No, there's a synagogue in Rhode Island that George Washington wrote a letter to. Famous letter George Washington wrote about the Jewish rights to live in America. Anyway, so I believe it there too, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, the synagogues had sand for the floor.
Sand?
Yeah. And part of it is to be aware and cognizant of the Jewish people traveling in the desert, which is evocative of the dependence of the Jewish people on God. Right? Like in the desert, we wandered and we relied completely wholly on God, like the Sukkah, right? Reminds us of that. We rely on God. So they had sand, yeah, like the Mishkan, they had sand in synagogues. And I think, again, I don't know, so if someone watching this can correct me on the history of this, feel free, please. But I think people used to go into those synagogues barefoot.
Used to what?
Go into those synagogues barefoot. But
at the beach.
having said that, the halacha is you have to cover your shoes when you daven. You have to cover your feet when you daven. You can't daven barefoot. And that's for tznius reasons. For like modesty reasons, we cover our feet when we daven. So maybe socks, not shoes. I don't know. But although Moshe Rabbeinu was barefoot, the Kohenim were barefoot, but the halacha remains that when we don't
Yeah, well, 'cause
daven barefoot.
modern times, you have women in synagogue.
There's also modesty, like you don't uncover parts of your body that are meant to be covered all the time. Yeah.
Also, a lot of men have, fungus on their toes, toenails.
Yeah.
Threads.
Yeah.
I was in the-
So if someone knows the history of these synagogues with sand, I'd love to hear more about it. So please share.
I was in one of the oldest synagogues in the world,
Where?
in Cairo.
Oh, in Cairo or not in Alexandria?
Cairo.
Rambam synagogue?
It says it.
That would be more-
all the way
more
back
awesome.
to,
Oh, Rambam synagogue.
There's a Rambam synagogue in Cairo, still around.
This is Ben Ezra.
I don't know if that's the Rambam synagogue. I'm not sure.
I could find.
Yeah. Okay, we'll stop here. And God willing, tomorrow we get to, we mentioned way back that in the temple they wouldn't respond Amen. They had a different program for their brachas, and that we'll get into tomorrow. And then the Mishnah, we get more to actually about Yom Kippur and the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, about the reading and the blessings that were done then.
Wow,
Okay, more on that we'll go willing tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, Yidden.
thank you.
Have a cute story.